Aaron's on. Oh, perfect. So we're all here. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Nice to see everyone. Up first is our consent agenda. We have prior minutes from the January 3rd meeting, and we have a number of second read policies. Any discussions, questions, concerns? Okay. I'll make a motion then to accept that consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. It doesn't look like we have any visitors here and no one in the virtual world, eh?
No.
All right. We have no school spotlight this month. And as I understand it, we're not doing a financial business report tonight. Just double check this bookmark.
Correct.
Okay, so that brings us to you, Lynn.
Okay. So, Courtney, do I have a slideshow?
You sure do.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start out with our personal report. We have a couple of resignations that I'll ask you to take. Sorry. Is there what feedback?
Not on our end.
I'm gonna change mine, hold on.
It seems like Zoom, people always have to feedback in this room.
Right, we really haven't been able to
Yeah.
quite.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is much better for me, I was not being able to go back. Okay, so, we have under resignations, Rotary Corps Principal of Bakersfield, Emily Lincoln, Middle School Science Teacher, and Birth Care. So I'd ask the board to, make motions to accept both of those resignations.
I'll make that motion. Kat,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
We'd just like to thank Rhoda for her community and wish her the best. They will come through for her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda.
We have some open positions remaining in NMVUUSD. Most of them are for the next year at this point is what we're looking for. So we have educators we still have nobody for the written teacher. Well, at Bakersfield, technology support specialist at Relevant. And we still continue to look for teachers throughout the year. And I do think we have paraeducators and behavior technicians at Shelton as well.
If you have to talk.
So I will, let me know if you sent me something, but I didn't actually see it. So where did you send that list? Could you just give me?
The list that I sent you earlier today,
For the legislative updates?
that is on your cell phone, text message.
Okay. I don't actually see it, so I'm gonna start before he's gonna tell me what I forget. So I'll start out with, an update around, PCDs and also around school construction aid. Thank you, Courtney. So the legislature is contending with, trying to navigate the decades-long, deferred maintenance in a lot of the public schools in Vermont. They did facilities assessments on schools across the state, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that are in need of repair in our schools. So they're trying to contend with how do they manage that level of need and afford it as a state. So there's a lot that they're considering. They're definitely talking about the intersect between the PCB legislation, which we now have many schools in Vermont who have been identified as having PCBs and have some rooms or spaces that they can no longer use because of the level, or rooms or spaces that can be used only with some mitigation measures going on. So there are some schools, there's one example in the Northeast Kingdom where they have 100 giant air filtration machines that are running at all times in their school. And that's just to be able to keep the air clean enough to lessen what the elevated risk is around the PCBs. So what's challenging in the legislation is that there was money that was set aside last year in the legislature, and I think it was around $32-ish million, and I think it's somewhere around 16 million that has been earmarked of that money to go towards Burlington High School. I think that's our most public situation in terms of the PCB issues. With what has already been discovered in Vermont schools, it does not appear to be that there's going to be enough money in that fund to be able to fund the remediation of the PCB projects. So I think that they're focusing on mitigating. So taking the short-term measures to make the space safe enough. One of the conversations that I was on recently started talking about prioritizing the money that's remaining, the schools that have levels that are in the immediate action level, and making sure that they put money towards those projects. They've talked about the money that they will need to continue to set aside that goes towards testing. So long story short, when it comes to the PCB, there's not going to be enough money to take care of all the schools that have already been identified. And because we haven't been thoughtful around, the vision for public education in Vermont and what's going to happen with state construction aid, we could be mitigating PCBs in some schools that are going to turn around and have giant construction projects down the road. Or there are some schools that are extremely small in the state, and as we're navigating this challenge around education funding in Vermont, that conversation is going to continue to circle back around about how many schools can we afford to operate in the state. So there's movement in the legislature. I don't know, obviously, how this will end. There are conversations happening about pausing the PCB testing, and I certainly would support that until we can get a handle on what we're going to do for the construction aid, because the reality is if we identify PCBs in schools, we then are obligated to take care of the issue around PCBs, and we only have so much time to do that. And so some of these communities are going to be left looking for bonds to take care of the PCB mitigation, and that is not how any of us understood it when it began. So we're watching that really closely. There is legislation around early literacy that I feel that they will make a move around that. And I think that
Lynn, I'm sorry to interrupt, Lynn. Before you transition from the PCB conversation, I'm not sure that I hear what you're saying as far as a pause in the testing because there aren't funds to deal with the ramifications, especially if we have to look at, new construction. But at the same time, that feels a little bit like head in the sand. Like, just because we don't test for them doesn't mean they aren't there, and then it's more time that students and staff are gonna be put at risk by possible exposure. I mean, so I'm not sure, I don't understand why we wouldn't wanna continue to know the status across the board of all our schools in the SU, independent of what might be happening at the state level. And I know the testing itself is really time consuming and backlogged and laborious and is moving at a glacial pace, but I don't know that just because we can't fix it in the immediate, that not knowing isn't still important.
I hear what you're saying. I was talking about it more from the state lens, Mary, in terms of
Okay.
we have to be able to manage the projects that we have. And right now, we're so, it isn't this cleaned up, have been identified, and we're still backlogged at this point. We haven't been able to do hardly anything in Berkshire, by way of an example. We're still reading. We have to retest, we have to take samples, there's so many steps in the process, and there are timelines that you have to wait a certain number of days between certain steps, and it's a really lengthy process. So I totally hear what your concern is. The reality is, we almost have to catch up. We have to figure out how to manage the schools that we currently have in this situation. For us, it probably isn't going to do much for us, because by the time we make it, it will likely have tested all of our schools. Because we asked to be Old Hollow, because we're looking at a project at Old Hollow. If we didn't want to do a project, or we knew about that, because we're too large to roll it into one, and we have to do some sort of conclusion around that. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't see how we keep going until we identify where the funds are going to come from, and, sorry, I have terrible feedback. We identify where the funds are going to come from and what's going to happen with construction aid. Because the reality is there are going to be schools that will be identified, and then what happens from there when you don't have anyone that can go. The testing is so backed up, and now the remediation is so backed up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation all around. There are no easy answers, and the path forward seems clunky at best, but I think as much as we can on our own continue to ascertain the PCB risk in our buildings, regardless of, the chips will fall where they may, and we may have to get really creative about where we're putting students and where they can be and where they can't be. But I would hope that we continue to work with the state to get the answers soon, so we don't have unnecessary risk and exposure in those buildings.
And
I'm glad you said something, Mary, because that is what I heard you said, Lynn, but more saying that you would support it like at the legislative level to continue the path that they're on. But isn't this kind of a top priority? And is this getting discussed in conjunction with all of the financial stuff that's going on when we're talking about potentially districts and other SUs that are wanting to do construction projects? It would seem that any construction project shouldn't even be allowed until our schools need safe and healthy statewide. I'm talking our SUs, like everywhere.
I think it would be worthwhile it has been discussed at the legislative level, and it's all connected. There's a fixed amount of money at the state is the other piece, we contended. And just want to remind us that I'm not conditioning the PCP risks, but we're the only state that has taken this program. And our levels are, I think it's about 3 times more strict than the NPA level. So it is aggressive is not the right word, but it's a very strict process that they put in place for Vermont in terms of what levels trigger action in the state. So there is data around how much exposure actually creates bigger risk, and it has to do with age levels, and it has to do with how many days and how many hours. And I wish I had that data in front of me, but it is like over the course of many years, and having been exposed to like 10 plus hours for 200 days a year, it's a lot of exposure before you start getting into the high level of risk. So I just think that this is a conversation that we have to get a handle on in the state, the connection between education spending, what we're doing around PCDs, and what we're doing with construction projects, because not, like, we're all tied in our education fund. So when people do construction projects, it impacts all of us. And that's something that they're gonna have to figure out. The amount of money that they were talking about the other day is hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that they need to figure that piece out at the same time, instead of like accelerating one, going the other piece now. This is my fear is they could throw good money after that. When if they decide they have to make some decisions around our education finance system, and we've already put $1 million in certain schools. Is another piece of this. So there's a lot of factors at play. Any other questions or comments on that? I'll shift into, I think I was going to early literacy next. I feel as though we're in good shape. The legislation that looks like it's moving through right now is centered on science of reading approaches. It's centered on professional learning. Those are two of the bigger components, and we've just finished our study, our review of our science of reading programs that we're going to be moving towards for next year. And we're already planning professional learning for our educators. And so I feel like we're in an okay position with that. There may be elements of the bill that I'm not aware of yet, but I will continue to watch for that. We'll go back to mental health. That's something that I've talked to this board about a lot. There are problems with our mental health delivery system. It's underfunded, and I think that I'm not overreacting when I say that we're in a crisis place in terms of access to mental health services, especially for Vermont youth. So the stance in the last several years that I have seen come out of the legislature is that they are getting comfortable with creating grant opportunities or funding opportunities for things that schools can do to support mental health of our youth. And I understand that and have appreciated that. At the same time, we need to pivot because we can't do we're not mental health professionals, so we cannot support students at the highest levels of need. So I was supposed to testify today and it got postponed. One of the things that partners in our mental health agency, myself, have talked about, along with other superintendents, is, we're all building our internal systems around mental health because we just don't have access to alternative programs or enough services to meet the needs of students. So we have positions in public schools that we never had before. We have programs in public schools that we've never had before. So there comes a point, though, where even in our alternative programs, sometimes there are kids whose needs are much more complex than that, and they're actually in crisis situations where they might have experienced a suicide attempt or ideations, or maybe even homicidal attempts or ideations. And there's, when those situations happen, the ER is where most people bring children when that happens, and then there's not always something that comes after that. I did a little research in terms of data, and there are only 9 emergency crisis beds in the northern part of Vermont. All 9 are in Chittenden County. One of those facilities is open 4 days a week. The other is open 5. They're licensed for greater capacity, but they don't have staffing. So it's challenging. When kids have that level of need, there's no place for them to go. It's incredibly challenging. There's also a need when students need more intensive residential therapeutic intervention. That last year when I looked at the data, more than 50% of students that needed that had to go out of state, which is a huge access and equity barrier for students whose families live in poverty. And so that continues to be a concern of mine. This year, it looks like the data has turned a little bit. We're just over 50% of our students in residential treatment are in the state of Vermont. So what I'm advocating for is no more sending money to schools to manage the mental health crisis. We don't need that money. Honestly, that money would be best served going to our mental health partners in and make that system healthy again. And quite frankly, the next thing I'll talk about is the education funding system, and this actually ties right into that because for those of you who are on the SU board, you sat through a pretty lengthy presentation that I did at the last meeting, and I think I sent that to all board members after the NMVUUSD meeting. The education funding system, in my mind, is really no longer the education funding system. It's disguising expenses that are really driven by, a significant portion is driven by the mental health needs and services that we're now providing to our students. So I think that the issues around underfunding our partners in the mental health agency are increasing costs substantially in the education fund. So, Mary, can you get a sense from the room of how many people understood or had the opportunity to interact with the 5% tax rate cap that I spoke about in the last SU meeting?
Well, I'd say in the room, probably no one is fully abreast of the 5% cap issue because we really, that was more reserved for the SU board.
Okay. So I'm going to try to do a quick overview of where we've been. I knew this part of the meeting would be the longest. I promised the rest of my part won't be as long, but this is really important. So in Act 127, which our board had been preparing for several years, the intent of that law was to more appropriately weight students. So acknowledging that certain students cost more to educate than other students. So a child who's an emerging multilingual learner or a child who is in special education or who lives in poverty costs more to educate than some other children. High school students cost more to educate than elementary students. So they, under Act 127, they recalculated the weights, and it was much more data-driven than we used to have equalized pupil counts. Now we use what's called long-term weighted average pupil counts. So the intention is that it should matter less which zip code your parents live in, that students should get more equitable opportunities across the state as a result of the reallocation of the weights. So it worked for us. We saw quite a substantial growth in our number of students, which allowed us to increase opportunities without increasing our tax capacity. So being able to offer more without it costing our local residents more in terms of tax capacity. So there are a lot of factors at play in Act 127, and one thing that happened, and this was unintended, and they didn't really see this when they were modeling. So for those systems who lost capacity, so they serve a different population than what we have. They historically had much higher per pupil spending than what we have seen in FNASU. They have lost tax capacity, so in theory they should be reducing some of those positions so that they can get to a more equitable place. So to bring down their per pupil, essentially. So what they did in the law was they allowed those systems with lost tax capacity to have access to a 5% tax rate cap for the first 5 years of this transition. And the theory behind that was so that you didn't have to make huge changes in the first year, that you could ease your way in, and your taxpayers would have some protection. Their tax rates wouldn't go up by more than 5%. So in that law, they had a 5% tax rate cap, and then they had a second level, and that was if your spending per pupil education spending increased by 10% or more, it was supposed to trigger a tax rate review. And under the tax rate review, if the reason that you had to go over 10% was because there were situations that weren't in your control, and they were totally justifiable, then you could keep your 5% tax rate cap. But if you were making choices that were in your control and you were just adding money, you could lose your tax rate cap for that year and the next 5. What they didn't anticipate was the way the law was written actually allowed for additive spending once a district got to the 5% tax rate cap, they recognized there was quite a distance from the 5% tax rate cap to the 10% education spending. So they could spend, I'm making this up, $10 million, and their tax rate was $1.32. And then they did the math and realized they could spend $12 million, and their tax rate was still $1.32. In some districts, they could add several $million without it impacting their local residential tax rate at all. So what happened was that additive spending was allowable under the law. It just wasn't predicted that that was going to happen, and it wasn't the intention of the law. So what ended up happening is there were districts that put in quite a lot of money in that, and when they did a survey, we did a survey a couple of weeks ago to see like how bad is this, how much more money are we anticipating people are spending in districts across Vermont. What they realized was, I need to back up, I forgot one important detail. So that money between the 5% tax rate cap and the 10% per pupil spending, any money that a district spent between those two numbers didn't impact their local property tax rate, but it did impact every district in the state whose tax rate was below the 5% cap. So what that essentially means is that historically advantaged districts generally had the ability to spend more. They could obligate that money out of the ed fund, but they couldn't pay for it. So the only systems that were left to pay for it were the historically disadvantaged districts. Does that make sense? That's kind of an important nuance there. So that extra spending was going to be paid for from districts like ours, and it was going to impact the non-homestead tax rate and the income sensitivity formula. So what they realized is more money had been obligated than was projected in November. And what that essentially did was it drove every district in Vermont to the 5% tax rate cap because of that additive spending. When the legislature figured this out, they recognized this wasn't something that we couldn't manage it as a state, because the dollar yield, which is the number that you get out of that December 1 letter, is really important, because that yield is what helps you to calculate what your equalized tax rate is going to be as a district. And as the yield drops, you're going to pay more. So the yield dropped because of all of that additive spending, to the point that everybody got to the 5%, and which made that yield. They couldn't do anything else with the yield because it no longer could raise enough taxes to be able to pay for the obligations, essentially. So the legislature has been working feverishly to find a correction. And I sat in on a meeting yesterday, and I think that I feel strongly that they've gotten to a good place. What they're proposing is that they remove the 5% tax rate cap this year, which is problematic because people are ready to go to their votes. They're proposing that they give districts the authority to delay their votes and rewarn new budgets based on this new information. So the best way I can describe what is in this new proposal is, if you think about the education fund, it's like a whole piece of pie, right? So last year, before the funding system changed, we got this much of the piece of pie. This year, because we gained capacity, we got like 9% more. I think it was 9% in ER, and I think it might have been something like 13% more in NMV. So we got more of the pie, which means some districts who lost tax capacity are getting less of the pie. So for those districts that, let's say that they're getting 13% less of the pie, in this proposal, in year one, they would get 13 cents off the tax rate in that community. And then that would reduce to 80% of that for the next year. So for the math for that district would be 13 cents in year one, 10 cents in year two, 8 cents in year three, that's 6, and then 4, and then none. So this new proposal, they project that this will cost about $30 million as a state. It is a much more palatable than the tax rate caps and the fact that was going to have as a state. This is tough news for a lot of places, and it is, people are pretty upset about this shift. So I'm going to keep watching this, and I'll update you in March. We could be closer to getting this approved, and we could be in a totally different place. It's shifted a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, so I'm hopeful that it goes forward. Certainly makes it a more equitable impact across the state. There are still some problems. There are some districts in the middle who are taking a pretty big hit with this, so it's not perfect by any means, but I think it makes a lot more sense than the tax rate cap. What questions do you have? That was a lot.
I have a quick question. So my understanding is what you just said, there's a really good chance the lawmakers might change the law in the next few weeks, but not soon enough to accept the budget that we've already accepted, and we might change or might have to reconfigure the district budget? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, essentially, it's very close, John. For us, we would have no reason to rewarn. Our budgets will likely be similar or better, because by making the shift, it actually reduces spending overall, the obligation overall, because it doesn't drive everybody to the 5% tax rate cap. So the yield is proposed to go up to, I think it was like 97 something. So that yield improves it for us even more. So we're still going to have the impact from the CLA, but we anticipated that piece of it. So we wouldn't have a reason to rewarn. It would be better, I think, than what we actually put on our dealers. So because we used the lower yields, we felt like it was the only ethical thing to do was to use the lower yield that we had at that time. So we won't need to do that, but for some districts that maybe have to relook at their budget, if I put money into our budget and then thought we were going to have to pay for it, but now the 5% rate cut goes away, and then the obligation is ours, we would be having a conversation as a board saying, can we really afford to put this $5 million in? Because now with this change, there's a 1-to-1 correlation. So if you budget that, your local property taxes are going to increase to pay for that. Does that make sense? Because the tax rate cap is gone. So it impacts them. It does impact some of the yield, but it more directly impacts that community. So there'll be some communities, I already know of some, that are rewarding their budgets. So in theory, it should reduce spending even more.
I mean,
Let me know, Mary, if you think I'm ready to move on.
yeah, and I guess I would just add that, you know, our budget and the way that we created it and crafted it was really aligned with the original intention of Act 127. And so, you know, as a historically disadvantaged system, you know, and so I think that is another, you know, we're fortunate that we're not going to be in this position to have to rewarn, and the fix is going to likely soften some of what we were seeing transpire with certain systems kind of using that 5% cap loophole, but it does kind of speak to the fact that we designed that budget to obviously be good stewards of taxpayer money, but also take advantage of the law in the way in which it was meant to be used.
I just want to add one point that there are a lot of factors that have driven education spending up. You know, one is the collective bargaining agreements, the cost of our health insurance, that's all negotiated at the state level. That's up 16% this year. inflationary pressures that are coming down upon schools. Also the loss of the federal money, the federal recovery money, all of this is like a perfect storm. So there are tons of pressures on the education fund in addition to the additive spending. Like it was more than our system can handle. So this is, I think, well, without doubt, an important piece of legislation that I'm always trying to participate in. I will keep my eye on this. Morgan is, I don't know if I told this before, but Morgan is actually the president of Vermont School Business Managers. So he is integrally involved in this across the state. He's leading the way. So he's playing a pretty important role. Okay, if I keep moving on, Gary.
Yeah.
There's just a few more as I also stuff on this. Watching legislation around when people use tuition money to pay for education in schools that are not public. It's really important in my mind, and I'm watching for this, that those schools have to meet the same expectations that public schools do. So by way of one example, that they can't discriminate against students in special education as one way, that they should be reporting the way we are reporting, and they should be required to have licensed educators the way we are licensed. There's a lot more to that, but it's essentially a use of public dollars to pay for tuition, that they should have the same rules and expectations that public schools have. There's a bill around CTE programs, and it's, in the end, it's really looking at funding for CTE programs and the governance structure of CTE programs. We're fortunate that our CTE program essentially serves our two high schools. We do have some students that come from EFA Fairfax and Sisquoy, and we have a couple from EFA St. Albans. But there are some systems that are serving students across like 13 districts, so it's incredibly complicated. And there are some financial disincentives for some districts to send students off to CTE. So this bill is intended to reduce some of the barriers related to that as they figure out the governance, figure out the funding structure. And part of this is even looking at a statewide calendar, so that you can imagine when you're a CTE director and you have 13 different sending districts, their calendars don't align, which makes it really hard to figure out which days you're operating in your CTE center. And the calendars is one piece of that, and I think I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Essentially, it's looking at accessibility to CTE programs and removing barriers for kids to be able to access those programs. There's a bill that is looking at open meeting laws and allowing boards to have, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about this bill. I have not dug in deeply. The way I understand it, I believe it is intended to allow for fully virtual meetings. So that's the way I understand it, but I could be wrong. I'll get a clearer update for our next meeting. There's quite a bit of discussion around us banning flavored tobacco products in Vermont, which is something, I certainly would support. I think there is a lot of data that supports that the flavored tobacco products are, a lot of times those flavors are geared towards kids, and I would love to see that not be the case. Any questions on any of the legislative pieces that I just spoke about? Next on my agenda, I have annual meeting preparation. Of course, you remind us when their annual meeting is, when and where the annual and the informational.
The annual meeting is February 21st at Bakersfield, and the informational meeting is February 27th at Berkshire. There are different times. Bakersfield is at 7, and the one in Berkshire is at 6.
So can we just, Mary, if you do it from the room, can you figure out who can be able to attend which meeting? I think it's important. Know that.
Okay, and Lynn, we need quorums for both of those?
You need a quorum for your annual meeting, you don't need a quorum for your informational meeting.
Okay. How are folks feeling about being able to make that Wednesday, the 21st, 7 o'clock in Bakersfield?
I can do that, just fine.
Yeah,
So, wait a minute. February 21st
yep,
is Bakersfield?
yeah,
And then
And
the
that's 7?
at 7.
and then John, the 27th is the informational at 6 at Berkshire.
Okay, let's see. 27. Berkshire, 6. Okay. I can make both of those.
Great. Arlene?
Yeah.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay. Miranda? Do those?
And then, yes,
Okay, and Erin, do those dates work for you?
I can make the first one, the second one I'm out of state.
Okay, no problem. The first one is the more important one as far as a quorum goes. And Kat?
yeah, I don't know how it looks like a calendar, I know I have them written down and,
Okay,
I'll do what I have to do.
All
Is
right.
there a Zoom option for either one,
that's a good
or are these
question.
like in person?
Zoom option?
So we're going to do a Zoom option, yes, webinar. But I will probably, if board members have to Zoom, we usually do it, I'll make you a panelist. So you would get a separate invitation.
Okay.
If
Okay.
that makes sense. I think that's how we've done it in previous years.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
So it looks like generally everyone, and Lisa's not here, so I can't speak to her availability, but it looks like everyone is good.
Great. Courtney, could you reach out to Lisa to just figure out if she can be there? Or which she'll be able to attend.
Okay.
Mary, in terms of meeting prep, I think we've typically had you prep mostly with Morgan. If there's anything that you need me to help prep for, I'd be happy to do that. Is there anything else that you're thinking for these meetings?
No, I don't think so. I feel pretty good about, I've got Morgan's most recent NMV and the SU slides to go through, and I mean, right before the meeting, it might be nice for the three of us to just clarify who's going to be kind of speaking at what points during it.
Okay. We have published our annual reports. They're not even saying, but we've all got an opportunity to get them. Kudos to Courtney, who did a ton of work to get that ready for us to get out. Thank you for that, Courtney. The annual reports, it was difficult to write about education funding this year because everything is so up in the air. What I essentially said at the end of my report is I really don't know at the time we get to these annual meetings. I don't know what's going to be happening, but we'll give an update. So I think Mary will be right up to the wire figuring out how we're going to describe, what we're expecting on tax bills. It's always, in any given year, it's an estimate of your tax bills because the legislature doesn't set the final yield until May. But there are a lot more moving parts this year than what there typically are, so we'll do our best there. Next on the agenda is school year 24-25 contracts. It is that time of the year. I would ask the board to make a motion to grant me the authority to sign the employment contract for all NMV employees.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Emily. I roll Kat,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
So, I had asked Vern to give an update on the Fort Farm Road, and he thought he was gonna have a little more information than we have right now, so I don't really have anything new to share other than he's put the ball back in the town's, court, and we're waiting to hear from them about how we're going to proceed around the Fort Farm Road project, so I didn't want that to fall completely off the radar, we're still kind of navigating that. An additional piece that I've asked for Morgan and Vern to be really thinking about is how in Sheldon we can disconnect the parent pickup and drop off from the bus pickup and drop off. So I'm asking them to get creative and think about how we can solve for that problem, because it is, it complicates everything with traffic backing up and kids having to cross where the buses go or drop off. So I think it's something that's important, and we'll continue to explore ideas. We did, Emily, maybe you or Miranda know a little bit about this. We did have an idea of cutting in down below the basketball court and shooting out to where the kitchen driveway connects, and then bringing it around the building out onto the front road. But we learned just yesterday, I think, that the land on the right as you're coming into the driveway belongs to the library. Do you know anything about that?
No. I mean, I'm not surprised by it. We can do some digging and see what's going on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get any information on that, you could let us know. Vern's on the case too, and maybe you could connect us to someone who is on the library committee too, that we might be able to talk with, to see if there's any openness to helping us solve this problem with the drop off and pick up spot.
Sure.
So I'll move on to the St. Pierre land gift. I'm happy to report that we closed on that property. I believe it was the 30th of January. So the land actually now belongs to the NMVUUSD school district. Vern and I went and met with the Berkshire Select Board, and we asked for them to consider putting lights on that four-way, so that right now you have a stop from the Richmond side coming into school and from the Edisburg side coming into the school. So there's stop signs right now. What we asked was, would you consider blinking reds there? And right in front of the school, the speed limit is 50 miles an hour, and there's what we asked you to consider was a blinking yellow and a reduced speed limit when there were busy times of the day, or pick up some drop-offs, like when Sheldon does it. So I believe Sheldon slows that traffic down 2 or 3 times a day. And we asked for them to consider something like that. We also asked for them to consider, and obviously we'll have to do a permit when it comes time to thinking about what we're going to do for overflow parking there. But we also asked for them to consider a crosswalk from that parking lot over to the school. Vern and I had met with Heather Moore, who has done a lot of grant work for us. And there was a particular grant that just came out that we got permission from the Berkshire Select Board to pursue, because we can't, as a school district, do any of that work. That all has to and they got back to us after we presented to them, and they're in support of it. They're not in support of the funding piece, so we have to look for the grant funding to be able to accomplish this. So I just wanted to give the board that update. Any questions on that?
And so with the stoplights and things that are around like road, kind of related to the roads, that's nothing that the state has money for through the Department of Transportation to make crosswalks more, safer and improve lights and put speed signs up and stuff.
So what we've been told is it has to be requested by the town, that we couldn't make, because this is something, I'll be honest, I wanted to do this since I was sitting in Gavin's chair. This has been something that has been kind of a mission of mine, is to slow that traffic down. a little bit there and, deal with the parking issues when there are events. So I think that part of the grant, Mary, comes out of the state. I think the grant we were looking at, so yes, I do think that there's money related to getting this funded. So at this time, I'm not asking for any money from the board, we're trying to explore how much grant funding we can get to do it. And, you know, the benefit that we have, the school district, is we have Vern's expertise. He's pretty savvy at seeking these grant opportunities, and we also have Heather's expertise for writing the grants and getting these funds secured. And that's something we offer up to the town. If they would support it, we'll help you through Vern and Heather to get this project underway.
And does the town have the authority, or is it at the state level to say, we're going to put a new speed limit here, we're going to install, you know, lights and crosswalks? Like, who has the actual authority, since they're town, you know, as far as the roads go?
That is a state highway right here, that's Route 19.
Department of
So
Transportation.
it is the town, it's the state that has that authority, but the request, like, the town has to approve of it, the request actually has to come from the town to do that.
Gotcha, okay.
Where is the piece of land actually? You don't have a diagram or anything yet?
I do have one, but I don't have it, I'm not in Vermont right now, I don't have anything with me. So it's the plot of land, like right in front of the school, there's the school sign. Directly across the road from that, there's a triangular lot right there. And as you're driving from 118 East Berkshire towards the school, you can see on the right, there's a little, it looks like there's a quasi little driveway that they must have built up because they hate that field. And when you see where that driveway is, that's all part of that little parcel. Make sense?
I think so, thank you.
Okay. So, can I move to board monitoring plan, Mary?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, on the board monitoring plan, I pulled data from our assessment results from the fall and from the winter. Cornelius, any way that you could slow that up just a little bit?
Probably not. It doesn't like zooming.
Can you? Okay. Can you tell if it says first?
Yes, this one says first fall, first winter.
Okay. So when I shared this at last night's meeting, the ER one was different. I just wanted to make sure that this one wasn't.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing here are the literacy assessment results. The first bar is all first graders in NMV compliant in the fall. The second bar is all first graders in NMV in the winter. So that just ended at the end of January. So recognizing that the benchmark gets harder for the winter assessment than it was for the fall. So the blue means exceeding the standard. The green means meeting the standard, the yellow is approaching, and the red is below. So you can see the next two bars would be second grade fall, second grade winter, third grade fall, third grade winter, and so on and so forth. So that is the data that represents each of our grade levels. We have seen growth in many areas. Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do in that area. I feel like it's an important move that we're making this next year to shift to the science of reading program and doing more of the structured language work that is more in line with the most current research around literacy. So we'll continue to monitor this. You'll get to see this data again, I believe, in your May or June meeting. I don't remember when that assessment, the spring assessment window ends, but you'll get to see this again, so you'll see fall, winter, spring comparison for all the grade levels. On the next slide, it's the same thing, except these are your math results, and this is combined all NMV first graders. So one thing that I did differently in this report than in reports that you've seen previously, I did this based on the total percentage of students and not the number of students, because the number of students varies from week to week and month to month in each of these schools. So this is out of 100% of the first grade students. This is the number who are proficient or, above proficient, nearly or below. So these are their growth patterns. The lines across the middle, those reflect national 25th percentile, 75th percentile, and average score, I believe, was the blue line. So this is, just to remind all of you, it is new for us to be able to look at data this way, because we've never had a system where we've been able to upload data from all of the schools and be able to collate it together and be able to report out in this way. So our teachers, our principals, us at the central office, we're all able to get our hands on much better data than we've ever had before. At the school level, they're able to drill in to individual students' results in terms of which particular skills they have mastered and which they have not. So I think this has been really useful to be able to have this level of data to be able to inform our instruction better than we've ever been able to before. Are there any questions about that? Before I move from the cognitive data, I just want to say publicly, before I move to the STAR data, I want to say publicly that I'm still not allowed to release the 22-23 school year cognitive assessment results. So that was taken by our students last spring, and that data is still embargoed by the Agency of Education. So it is not in your annual report. I'm not allowed to share it yet. We will post that on our website as soon as that comes out. We'll have after a data bar. Just as a reminder, what we're looking for is this last year being the first year of administration around the cognitive as our baseline year, and our goals are centered around improvement and making sure that our students are making growth related to the cognitive standardized assessments for this year. So I think that window opens, principals help me out, is it March?
March 11th.
Is it different?
March 11th.
Perfect. So we're shifting into the next cognitive assessment. So, and it's possible we may not be able to release last year's results before we're done with this year's testing.
Lynn, is this how it is every year, or is this a result still of like COVID related delays? Because I feel like since I've been around, it kind of seems like there's, a good year's lag time. And I just wonder, is this the norm?
It is definitely not a norm. It has become a pattern, I would say. I don't want to call it a norm because I don't understand why it's taking so long to be able to do what they need to do with the data to be able to release it. So I thought that we were going to be able to get quicker data out. We've just barely been able to release our reports. So individual reports are able to go out to families, but we can't report publicly on any of the overall assessment results. So I hope that they can figure it out, because it's much more useful if we can talk about it closer to real time when our students are taking that assessment, rather than having to report out on 2-year-old data, which is less useful.
And I mean, do you think that the lack of data, does that impact the teachers and their abilities? I just think about as students go from year to year, from one teacher to the next. Obviously, each teacher gets to know them, but when you're talking about bigger picture data like this, do you think this is a lack of, is something that hinders the teachers and what they're kind of needing?
I think that because it's summative data, it's done closer to the end of the year, I think that what it's hindering is our ability to look at, all third graders for their particular skills and strategies that all third graders did really well with. all third graders really seem to struggle with. There is useful information at the individual student level, certainly. What we put in place over the last several years around our SMART assessment, our biological awareness assessment, concepts of print, and some of the other assessments that we do on our most comprehensive assessment plan. Teachers should be able to utilize that data. You could ask any of the principals in the room the information that they can pull out of the Renaissance program, which is what STAR is under, is really specific and useful data that they can get in real time. So they just took this in January, and the results are there as soon as they're done taking it, and they can go into that data. And I've seen some really effective teams being able to drill, and I sat in on a meeting last week actually at Richard Elementary School, and got to observe some really fabulous conversations around making data-driven decisions around kids and what they're doing for their reteach groups and things like that. So I think it has an impact, Kat, but we do have other useful information.
Thank you.
The last thing I just wanted to say, I spoke with Vern earlier today, and I just wanted an update. Both Berkshire and Sheldon were in a holding pattern when it comes to PCDs, like we don't know. In terms of next steps, we don't have a clear timeline. It seems like it is, the contractors are incredibly backed up, and we're waiting on the state in many cases related to how it moves forward. So nothing really new to update you on other than I know it's getting hard for people to do without those spaces in Berkshire, and the answer is just continue to be patient. We're going to do it as quickly as we can, but we can't do it out of order. We have to follow the state's directives around how we can do this. And I did hear you as you were setting up for your meeting about the echo in the room, and I think that was part of my feedback that I was getting earlier on in the meeting. And happy to report that we're ordered the sound waivers for the ceiling earlier this week, so hopefully it'll be better in the next couple of days. That's all I have for you, Jerry.
Thanks, Lynn, appreciate it.
She has something on other.
Whoops. I do have something under
okay.
other. Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
So we have, we've begun the Bakersfield Elementary School principal search. So we have a timeline. Our proposed date for the board to meet and do final interview rounds is, I'm going to ask Courtney to say it.
February 19th. Monday.
As,
And we're thinking 4:30 for the board to meet, and then interviews starting right after. That's a Monday.
Okay, what time? You said 4:30?
4:30 to meet, or we could possibly push it to 5, like we did at the last one.
one thing I would ask you to consider is you may have 2 or you may have 3 candidates, because that's the direction I give for the meeting. They have to send at least 2, and I don't want them sending more than 3 to the board. And each is usually about an hour.
I worry on a work day that 4:30 is gonna be challenging for people. How are board members feeling about 4:30? And we are gonna do this here, central office?
It will be at Bakersfield.
At Bakersfield, okay.
So it is President's Day, so some people might be off, which
Oh,
might make it
that's
easier,
right.
but not everybody, I'm sure.
Do we wanna,
Is there more people that could attend?
I'm available, at 4:30, but I would also understand if it's better for folks to push it a little. We just don't wanna go so late that we're there till 10 at night,
Yeah.
What's the date again? I'm sorry.
Monday the 19th of February.
I'm at work that day.
Okay,
I'm not available.
okay, no worries, we just need a quorum. How about you, Arlene? You're good. Kat, how does that work for you at 4:30?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Aaron?
I cannot make 4:30, and
Is there a time that works better for you?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, sorry, there's a bit of a lag. Is there a time that works better for you?
I mean, I can make it at 5, but this makes 3 board events, 3, like this week. And that's a lot for me in my schedule.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just looking at that.
What's the third then?
We have superintendent negotiations with the SU board on Tuesday the 20th, and then we have our annual meeting back in Bakersfield on Wednesday the 21st. So it is it's 3 nights in a row for folks who are on the,
I would suppose if you're looking to move something out of that week, I don't think it should be this. I'm happy to have you go into the next week, do the superintendent negotiations. I think that given the, where we are with the timeline, this should be the priority of getting this position filled as quickly as possible. So if you want me to go back and have Courtney look at Shirley survey and try to make a different night for superintendent, you could do that.
Erin, did you say you're out of town the following week?
I am.
Yeah, I'd like to not have to, it was tough for the superintendent negotiations to find the time, and that day and time didn't work for everyone, but we do have a majority, a quorum for it, so, why don't we, it sounds as though we will have a quorum for Monday the 19th. Erin, do you feel if we pushed it back to 5:30, does that make it potentially more doable for you?
If it's 5, I probably could make it. Yeah, that would be.
I wonder, Erin, if you would be okay with them doing the pre-meeting at 4:30 and finalizing the questions, determining who's gonna answer or who's gonna ask what, and then you come in right as if we're ready to begin the interviews.
I guess.
You feel, it sounds as though that's not ideal for you, Erin.
No, it's fine. I don't want to walk in on interviews, so I'm assuming you'll hold off until there's.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We wouldn't put you in the position of walking in the midst of an interview. No, we can absolutely just get all kind of organized and everything and make sure we're ready to go, and certainly wait for you to join. And that would be the case for anyone who, if 4:30 is tough for people's work schedules, then I think we can accommodate and just be ready to go as soon as everyone's there by 5.
So I think I heard Mary, Arlene, Kat, and Erin. Was there another that I missed?
I just have to check my husband's schedule, but I can follow up pretty quickly.
I think John said no. Miranda, were you able to make it?
I'll have to follow up with you guys on my schedule as well.
Okay. So Courtney, I think that's gonna be something for you to follow up tomorrow just to confirm, because that gives us 4 yeses. So we would need 5 for that quorum. You follow up with Emily, Miranda, and Lisa.
Okay. And Lynn, because it's a special meeting, we need to have a quorum. We can't set aside a subcommittee to do it.
You could do that. We would warn it as a special meeting in case you had a quorum, but if you want to make a motion tonight to appoint the 4 people to a subcommittee, a hiring subcommittee, you could do that.
Well, I think that might be prudent just in case, and it certainly wouldn't exclude anyone who as it draws nearer, that if someone is able to free up their schedule and join by all means, but then we've at least covered bases so we can proceed. If
I think
everyone,
that would be great.
if everyone feels comfortable with that strategy,
I agree.
okay. So I'll make that motion then for a hiring subcommittee, that at the moment seems to include myself, Kat, Erin, and Arlene. And then of course, anyone who can join is more than welcome. We'll do that by roll. Erin,
Hi.
Kat, Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily, and Mary is an aye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks so much, Lynn. Okay, so that brings us to our principal reports. Rhoda, you are up.
Don't have a whole lot more to add, I was just gonna say that we have dug into the data a little bit, and we have seen some good growth around our star data in certain pockets, and it's good to see those places of growth. I had done a presentation in the middle school before we took the star, around just taking it seriously. I showed them some of the data that from the fall and talked a little bit about, the importance of STAR and things that we could do to incentivize them taking it seriously. So they're coming up with some ideas on a big party in May if we see growth in both this time and in May. So they're working on that. They're going to give me their proposals. So that's been fun. And we just had a great concert the other night, musical concert. Because our students have done a really good job working hard on their musical performances, and it was just really wonderful to see. And we were a packed house, so it was kind of nice.
Thank you. Gavin?
So then, much like Rhoda, in terms of STAR has been driving a lot of our conversations, one of the things that's really was really encouraging is that overall across the grades, we did see an increase in proficiency. It's still not where we want to be, but it's a step in the right direction. And so the next thing will be working with the teachers to continue to leverage that data and use that to inform instruction. In terms of social-emotional learning, two major things, of course, with Black History Month being this year, our behavior support team was able to create a choice board of different lessons to help teachers implement Black History Month lessons into their instruction. In addition to that, our middle school has really revamped our campus culture block on Tuesdays to ensure that we have, basically there's just different ways to appeal to our students' learning. And oh my goodness, I am so sorry. That actually is on student-centered learning. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead on my notes, but the campus culture block is centered around our student-centered learning. It's ways just to find engaging and unique ways, whether it be trivia questions, solving brain teasers, baking, just to apply their learning into a different context. Our middle school for social and emotional learning is, even this past week, we've continued to meet just to find ways to further engage our students and celebrate positive behaviors by reducing undesirable or misbehaviors as well. At this point, we are looking at making some adjustments to our interventions for behavior, and we're also beginning our stages towards planning a rollout of a concept called Fun Friday. I know it's one that's done in Sheldon as well. And we're looking at ways to implement that as a way to celebrate student behavior as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Gavin, that's great. Sandy?
I don't have a lot to add to this. I would just like to say how much fun it was to be broadcasting the weather from Montgomery Elementary 4 hours ago. We had a great time. It was really dark at 4:30 a.m. and making 5 gallons of hot chocolate when I got to school was a first. So interesting and fun, and the kids were super excited, so it's a good time.
That's awesome.
Great, thanks, Sandy. Terry Sue?
I'm gonna jump on the data bandwagon. It is one of my favorite topics, is Zoom data. But just kind of to put the notes that you all received on our STAR results into perspective, our proficiency is in both reading and math. I don't know how it came to the exact same percentage, but it is 72%, not proficiency, sorry, growth, made over 50 points of growth, which is considered high growth. So 72% of our students hit that mark. And our biggest growth student made was 2.3 grade levels from fall to winter, and they tried on both, because I know that student, and they've been working their tails off to really catch up to their peers, as you know, they want to be at the same place. So that was really exciting to see. So less than 10% of our students either didn't make growth or were not proficient still. So I think that's a pretty good start. Over the last month, I've been noticing more and more staff in our buildings meeting on Wednesdays and Thursdays together after school unbidden. So that made me excited. I was walking through the halls last week and noticed a number of teachers who typically wouldn't stay late on a Wednesday or Thursday. They were there till 5, just, you know, they were there almost as long as I was on those days, meeting with their partners, trying to come up with what's the best interventions they could do both in wind time and in the general classroom. So that excited me that they're starting to see what I've been trying to preach, I guess, of using some data effectively and with more intentionality. I was especially excited to see some of our biggest naysayers starting to join in. So that's a win, and I was really excited about it. So.
Super,
Awesome.
thank you. All right, so that brings us to our board business. We have our Regional Advisory Board Representative Report. I believe that's you, Kat, eh?
Yeah, we're actually, I think, gonna have a meeting this month, so I might have like 10 board meetings this month. But the last one that we had in the fall, Nate DeMar was talking about different ways of just continuing to spread the word, of the Career Center and the different options that are out there. And it just kind of made me think a lot about the Portrait of a Learner, and that whole direction that we're going in. And also the push that you kind of see from the state level, like Governor Scott talking about, the trades and stuff like that. So I reached out to him after the meeting just to kind of pick his brain a little bit. And he's just super enthusiastic. And what I wanted to just come here and kind of spread the word. He's just really encouraging if any of the schools have students that want to go visit the Career Center above and beyond, like not just the 8th graders, because I had said, do younger kids come and visit you? And he said sometimes he more sees it maybe from like Enosburg, Richford. And that made me think too, like, especially Enosburg, those kids kind of grow up knowing about the Career Center, and it might be a little bit more foreign to some of the NMV schools. So I was just saying, like, how cool would that be to have like kindergartners go on a field trip, and then again like 3rd, 4th grade. And he said, I think he had 4th graders go from Richford, he said, and I don't know if they went to the auto class, but they got to hang out with the high schoolers, and it was just kind of cool to hear that. And he was just really encouraging again, and just said he can send a bus, or maybe he said split the cost of sending a bus to bring
kids, just really wanted to make sure that we all know that he has kind of open doors there for any kids that want to go visit. So I thought that was really cool. And that's it.
Nice. Thanks, Kat. That's excellent. And it would be interesting to figure out how we can kind of collaborate a little more, even at the K through 8 level, so that we really start to let our students know about options at the Career Center, because it's really incredible skill building. And job creation potential there. It's great.
Mary, I
It
think,
is, and it really kind of, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's part of the CTE bill too, is earlier access, and earlier introduction to the CTE center in that bill as well.
Nice. Kat, you had something else?
And yeah, it just kind of hit close to home for me because my kids aren't always so interested in school, and so when I have talked to them, they'll ask me like, when do we get done in school, and do we have to go to college, and those kinds of things. So we've had discussions very early on, just about all the different options that are out there, and especially with my 5th grader, I feel like this year, it kind of like the light bulb went off. I think he kind of sees like the light at the end of the tunnel, like maybe if he's not going to be a traditional student his whole career, there's other pathways for him. So it's really just inspiring for those kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. Any future agenda items that people might like to add now? There's always time. All right. So our next meeting will be March 6th, day after town meeting. We will be here in the central office. And I can't think of anything else. Lynn, anything else that we ought to mention before we adjourn?
I think, anything anybody can do to help spread the word that this is such a complicated time with ed funding. Try to encourage your friends and neighbors to either come to our annual meeting or our informational meeting. I think that if you could do that, that would be really helpful. And obviously, Australia balloting or going to the polls on town meeting day is also helpful. To weigh in, exercise your vote.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important for us to be having conversations with our friends, our neighbors, our people in our community, and helping, direct them to the book if they haven't picked one up or would like a digital copy. I assume it's on the SU website, Courtney, that people can link it, because I feel as though it's beautiful, by the way. I mean, I know that's an incredible heavy lift, and I really appreciate all you do, Courtney. I mean, I know it's a good team effort, but you do a lot of the heavy lift with pulling that all together. And I think it really beautifully, it encapsulates so much of what we are doing, both the districts and at the SU level, and all the kind of innovative practices, the good work that we're doing for our students, our families, and also tries to kind of frame in the letters that we write in there, the board letter and the superintendent letter and the business manager letter, tries to frame and kind of contextualize the numbers, which can often be a little jarring, and it's a big number, but it's important for people to kind of understand and put it in context. And when we're talking to our people in our community, to help them not get just such sticker shock that they don't understand all the forces that come into play around how we land at this number, and very thoughtfully develop these budgets. And I'm always happy, as I know any of us are, and Lynn and Morgan, to talk to people who might have concerns or questions that arise after they read through that, through the big book annual report.
The print version is printing right now, so they're not at
Okay.
town clerks in, but I'm going to pick them up early next week. They'll be ready, and then I'll deliver them to all the town clerks in schools. So they'll be there by next week.
Great.
Are we sharing
I
anything?
think
Are we sharing anything on Facebook around more information around when our informational meeting is, annual meeting?
I will, yes.
One of the things I'm wondering, is there a way that we can take the image of the FY24 educational spending per pupil, where it shows what we're spending, it shows the Franklin County average, because I feel like that's really jarring when people are like, oh, NMV, they're spending so much money, their budget's gone up. That's what I'm hearing a lot of in my town. But when you put it in that perspective of this is what Franklin County is spending and this is what we are spending on our children, I feel like it puts the whole conversation into the context that we need it to be in. That would be great.
I think that's such a good point, and that's something that we made sure is on our mailer, so that it's going to go to every home that they're going to get it, and we'll put that out too. I think that people need to understand, like, if we want more equitable outcomes for our students, we need to have more equitable opportunities. And because our funding has been so low per pupil for so long, this Act 127 is intended to give us more of those opportunities without adding tax capacity. So we need to keep reminding people of that. Focus on the opportunities, focus on, we're not gonna make much growth in terms of like, we're not all of a sudden gonna become a high spending district per pupil. We're still gonna land near
the bottom. So I think that's a good point to remind people to look at.
I wonder if if the mailer is such a good visual, I wonder if when we talk about the annual reports, I put, that's my visual, is the mailers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have them in digital version, so I could just put both mailers on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
It also shows the education tax rate pre-CLA, the pre-merger to this year. So I think that's important to take a look at as well.
Arlene, I know you had something.
I just wonder if we have a concern that, our annual meeting is in Bakersfield, it's the same night as math.
It is, but the time is okay.
Is okay?
Yeah, I've looked.
I talked to Mary Alice about that as well, and she's not super worried.
All right, great. Anything else, folks? All right, so I'll make a motion then, to adjourn by roll. Erin?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Emily? And Mary is an aye. Thank you all so much. We'll see you at the annual meeting.
Thank you.
Can I go?
Oh, your name.